and welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. This is episode 219 for your playbooks. My name's Aaron, and with me as always are the other two members of the Who Dat Jedi Council, Dave and Fredo. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hola.
Gee, what's new in the world? Huh. Let's see. Could it be like 10 inches of snow in New Orleans? You know, that was... Speaking of somebody who moved here from Nebraska almost 10 years ago, Dave, you've been in the South for a long time, coming from Kansas, right?
Yeah, 18 years.
Thought I left this crap behind. My running gag has always been the day that I gave away my snowblower was the second best day of my life, and I think I said that joke one too many times because comes 10 inches of snow. But I gotta tell you, it's funny because Britt and I were grumpy about the snow coming. I mean, seriously, I'm done with cold weather. I'm done with snow. I mean, was just grumpy about it. And then to see the absolute joy and wonder in my friends' posts and in their faces, my neighbors. We got neighbors to one side who are about as old as my in-laws, and she was out building a snowman yesterday because she's never been able to build a snowman in her entire life. And there was nothing that was going to stop her from making a snowman. My other neighbor, just a smile from ear to ear. And that made me go, all right, yeah, this is pretty cool, And it was a very pretty snow. And then the last couple days happen when it becomes melty and cruddy, but at least it'll be gone by the weekend. But that was, I didn't think I would see that here. So I don't know. How was your guys' snow day?
We had a good time, I mean, the kids we just had gotten caught in Kansas in a blizzard. We'd had all this car trouble, and we just got stuck. And so my kids really that was their first taste of snow, other than Olivia, who remembered it a little bit from when she was about 3.
And your dog Linus was like, what the heck, man? We left this. Exactly. I didn't like it up there. I don't like it down here.
Yeah, no, it followed us down here. That's the funniest thing. And so, it was funny. It was sort of like old hat for them. But I'm with you. Seeing it from the perspective of everyone who lived here, was really nice.
Fredo, you've been here but damn near your whole life. I mean, since you were 11.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was your reaction? I mean, I know you're a grizzled old, in your 40s,
mm-hmm.
get off my lawn type of guy, but I don't know what.
Well, that's what's interesting because I mean, thankfully for me, I've gotten the chance to experience snow beforehand. I've, whether it was in college in Memphis or even a few years back when we went up to Chicago to see my family up there. My brother was living up there, and we drive in, take the train, and we get off at the train station, and it's literally 8 degrees, and snow is everywhere, and you get to see what we got to see today when everybody's just backhoeing and shoveling the gray snow out of the street because you need to get to work. So there's a certain level of, okay, maybe some of the wonders lost, but I also remember being here in 1989, which was not the last time, but I think the most snow precipitation that I think the city has had. Where it was we're talking an eighth of an inch. It was a light dusting. There was nothing compared to Tuesday. I mean, I was able to go outside of my front porch and stick a ruler and go, 10 inches. Wow. And yeah, that's what the city got.
That's what she said.
Snicker, snicker, snicker,
Exactly.
snicker, snicker.
And look, and it was 10 inches in the cold. Those were some actual 10 inches. So, New Orleans was not trying to sneak an inch in there.
So I was scrolling through Facebook on Tuesday, mm-hmm. and in the 501st, the Bast Alpha Garrison, the New Orleans sector, one of the guys just posted a picture. And he wasn't in armor or anything, but he made mention. He said Hoth system with a question mark, and I saw that at about 1:00 in the afternoon. And I just went, oh, and I was like, I right after work, I went and I got all of my snow trooper armor together, and I got got duded up, my whole armor, and I was like, I'm never going to be able to like stand in this, in snow in this again. So Britt took a couple pictures of me in my snow trooper armor out in the snow. Let me tell you, by the way, first of all, if you see me wearing that thing in July, I sweat my tauntauns off. It is so awful because it's a fleece, you know, overcoat basically, Canadian muckluck, boots. I mean, these are Canadian Army, snow boots. And but standing in the snow, those are the best boots ever. I swear, if I lived in Nebraska and had to shovel snow through the winter, I'd wear those boots all the dang time. But my neighbors
Now,
got to see me in my snow trooper armor. They just got a kick out of it. So, yeah,
now I have to ask you this, Aaron, because I know you've mentioned this in past. How was your vision going down the steps
it
in
was
the
pretty
snow and
tough.
everything?
Britt thought I was going to fall, and I thought I was going to fall too. It was starting to fog up the thing. So then here's the problem, though. I posted that picture in my company, my company's Slack channel. We have a social channel, and somebody then I said I had to take advantage of the weather, and one of my coworkers said, "So do you have Endor Scout Trooper armor that you can bring to our next San Francisco get together, and we can get pictures taken in the redwoods?" And I'm like, well, no, but dang it, now I want to. So
This is how they get
that's
you.
how it is. But no, like I said, the glorious thing is, and I think Dave and I will say this as Midwesterners, you get this nice, pretty snow, and having it gone in like 4 days is a gift. I mean, it's gonna be mucky, but yeah. Otherwise, if it snowed like this in Nebraska, it'd be here until March. So
Pretty much, exactly right. And I love that we now have a little bit of trivia insight into just how warm the snow trooper costume is. It's practical.
it is, it is. Now I had long johns on, not just the normal like pants because that would have been cold. Um, so anyway, well, what are we doing tonight? We're gonna have a little bit of news, but mainly it was kind of my grand idea because what 217 episodes or 218 episodes ago we started this podcast because The Mandalorian came out on Disney Plus, and so we've gone through many a Disney Plus show, um, you know, over those however many couple years it's been, and decided let's go back and watch the OG. We're gonna watch. So you can watch along with us. We're going to watch the first episode of The Mandalorian Season 1. And we're just going to talk about, does it hold up? What are we kind of just not really comparing it to other, but just what, because we know we all loved it when it came out. But now that we've seen, because I know I have some specific thoughts about how they use the volume early on versus now, but just to kind of just go stroll down memory lane. So what we've done, you can open up Disney Plus and hit skip intro, and you'll be on the screen where you see Mando's hand holding the tracker. You can just pause it right there. But we have a little bit of news / rumor / something. So Fredo, over to you in the news desk.
So I'll just mention this is less rumor as because this is coming from the Guardian, and I know Dave also saw it in the Hollywood Reporter. So
They
on
report.
Wednesday,
By the way, they reported on it on either Good Morning America or the Today Show. One of the two. I think Today Show. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, if you're getting to that level, I'm almost certain that's going to happen. So Wednesday, they came out that Ryan Gosling is set to be the star of a as of yet untitled franchise movie in Star Wars, which is set to be directed by Deadpool and Wolverine director Sean Levy. So according to the Hollywood Reporter, Gosling is going to join a project first revealed in 2022 as one of several films that Lucasfilm is developing. Uh, he's working. Sean Levy is working with the same guy who worked with in Deadpool and Wolverine, Jonathan Tropper, and who also worked on a number of other things. So far, there's very few details. It's the only details that kind of say it's supposed to be a standalone story in the style of Rogue One or Solo. It's not supposed to be connected to the Skywalker saga. No release date's been announced, but Disney is holding a slot for 2027 for Star Wars. Apparently, they suspect that Gosling being involved may uh, precipitate accelerating the production process because they want to be able to get to it. I mean, we know they got Mandalorian and Grogu coming out in May of next year, and if you were to look at Ryan Gosling's IMDb page, right now the only thing he's got coming is he's working as the lead in the adaptation of Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. That's in post production. That's set to come out next year. There is nothing else on the slate. Sean Lee, before his part, started working on two, three different things, but again, they're all in various stages of development and whatnot. So if Disney decides, okay, we got director, we got star, we have a script, let's go. I mean, right now we know Mandalorian Grogu is in post production. That's coming. There's the James Mangold Dawn of the Jedi movie, but again, no idea when that's coming out. And we know they're holding December 2027 for a Star Wars movie, and this might be what gets them into gear to get something out there for that date.
We don't know if they have a good script or not. Like that's the thing. I think like that's the thing where you saw they paraded Daisy Ridley out on the stage and said, "Hey, we've got her on board and it's gonna happen," and they really didn't have a script that they liked. So that's been shelved. So like just getting the talent attached doesn't necessarily guarantee anything. But I think it's cool. I just watched him in The Fall Guy. Really enjoyed that a lot. He's a great comedic actor. I think he might be underrated in that way. And so I mean, like, I remember watching The Big Short and him standing out in that movie for being hilarious. And then, of course, um, he had his star turn in Barbie, and he did so well with that. And um, it's fun. It's a fun little bit of news. I think he would. I think he could be a potentially a really fun match.
If you've never seen The Nice Guys, the movie he did with Russell Crowe, which they're playing like detectives in the late 70s, he is hilarious. He's got incredible comedic timing. So it'd be interesting to see if this is, because again, standalone movie means you can do whatever you want. So whether they decide to go serious or decide to go a bit more, because I was watching Death's Rogue One and Solo on TV today, so it's like got to see both, and it's like you can totally see the tonal shift where Rogue One is far more serious with a few jokes, whereas Solo is much more action adventure. So we want you to like the characters, and Alden Ehrenreich is just shooting jokes back and forth with like Donald Glover and everybody else. So maybe they go that route. I don't know.
Until I see a trailer or behind the scenes footage, I am not getting. No,
You've been burned 2 months too many
I'm not
times
getting
before.
moved. I'm not getting moved. My thing, it was funny. I was like in the middle of work when you sent, right, started my work day, so and under caffeinated, and when you sent the article and it said, "I'm just Kenobi." In quotes, by the way. May I say it was in quotes. The headline, "I'm just Kenobi, colon, Ryan Gosling to be in new Star Wars movie." And I'm scanning through this and I'm like, it's like, that's a BS headline. It doesn't say anything about Kenobi at all. And Fredo was like, I think they're making a play on the Barbie movie. And at that point I was like, well, duh. But come on, Dave. Having worked in journalism, that's a crappy headline for a news article.
I'm not going to go that far. It, you're always looking for the pun.
Yeah.
You're always looking for the pun.
But anyway, it was like I said. Until I see a trailer, awesome. I mean, they could tell me that they're, I don't know. Yeah, just not even go there. Fredo, you're right. I've been burned so many times that, quit telling me we're going to Disneyland because we're not going to Disneyland. So I feel like, yeah, the Jack Handy thing is like, I like telling my kids, we're going to go to Disneyland. I take them to a burned down house and go, oh, look, Disneyland burned down. That's the way I feel with all these announcements. So anyway,
Yeah, no, it's again, it's as the article does kind of point out, you're getting to the point where you need to put something in production next. I mean,
well,
we're gonna get Andor season 2, which, by the way, right quick, there were rumors coming out that apparently the budget for season 2 of Andor was like the biggest of any Star Wars project so far,
I,
like over 260 million. But anyway, set that aside. You got Mandalorian going post production. After that is Ahsoka season 2, and that is it. There's promises and
and
ideas and creative locked in, but
they
let's
haven't
go.
they haven't done one thing really with Ahsoka season 2 either. So to Dave's
Mm-hmm.
point, which one of you said it? They literally brought out, Daisy Ridley on stage at Star Wars Celebration and says, "Here we go," and watch and see what has happened. So yeah, so that, I mean, I have nothing against Ryan Gosling being in a Star Wars movie. Great. Hey, I've got a report. They've brought Alec Guinness back from the dead, and he's going to reprise his role for Kenobi in Star Wars story. There, that's just as big. I mean, that's just as valid of a uh, headline as anybody else's. I mean, so show me something. I'm to the point where it's like, just show me something. I'm done. Otherwise, don't report that somebody is in a movie. So I'm grumpy.
Remember,
Yeah,
make you happier.
I mean, I was getting my hair cut today, and the guy at my barber, we're Solo, yes, was on whatever TNT or whatever, and he's playing, so that was cool. And then he made the point. He's like, yeah, I mean, we haven't heard anything. The Lando thing was supposed to come out. I was like, yeah, it's like, again, how many times are you going to tell your kids you're taking them to Disneyland and you take them to, yeah.
Burned out warehouse.
Right. So, anyway, show me something, Star Wars. Show me something. I'm tired of this. So, even though they're not the ones reporting on it, it's other people reporting on things, but that's what I should just do. But Facebook's not fact checking anything. I'll just start, making these reports. So anyway,
But in truth, it's not even them. At some point, Disney Lucasfilm has this property. They know they have to get stuff going. Make something. It doesn't matter whether you have the world's greatest script or you're making up as you go. Let's go. Like you keep announcing and promising. You got to start delivering.
what have you done for me lately?
Pretty
Anyway,
much.
well, okay. So enough of get off my lawn. I'm sorry I brought us down. Like I said, I think I like Ryan Gosling. I think it would be fine. I just have a problem with the headline and too many reports of other things. Anyway, um, Mandalorian season 1, episode 1. Are we ready? Oh, and by the way, kids, don't forget. In what is it, like a week? We got Chewbacca's, right? February 1st.
Yes, yes.
It's coming up too
Because it got
quickly.
moved up because of it got
Because of the
moved up
Super Bowl.
because of Super Bowl.
So be on the lookout. Just want to throw that out there. That's February 1st, Chewbacca's. So are we ready? Anything for the good of the order before we start the Mandalorian season 1, episode 1?
All good on this end.
Trip down memory lane. So I'll count 3, 2, 1, and then everybody hit play. So 3, 2, 1, play. All right. So did you think we were on Hoth when we first had this because it's snow and there's only one place in the universe that has snow?
No, because we already know that there's 2 places that have sand. So clearly, we have more planets.
So my first thought because I watched this not too long ago. I think when I was on a flight or something, and they did a very good job of making sure that this looked like Star Wars. Except I don't know if I'm a huge fan of Horatio Sands as whatever he is, but I don't know.
In some ways, this is, I mean, this harkens back. I think we said it back then. Harkens back to the Western origins of Star Wars. I mean, there's the Japanese samurai origins of Star Wars, but this is the movie Western origins of Star Wars, and this leans heavily into that. And so everything from the cantina that he walks into, the way that he's striding in, the mean looking, guys who don't look like they haven't showered in a month, accosting Mando.
And then when he walks in the front door, I remember the music.
It was like,
It reminded me of the
ooh,
good, the bad, and
yeah.
the ugly.
Mhm.
But seriously, I'm serious about the Horatio Sands thing. That's the only thing that makes me, again, in that quote, takes me out of it. You know what I mean? Because it's like everybody else is, we got the subtitles going on, and it's very much Star Wars, and then you have Horatio Sands being Horatio Sands in a mask, and I like Horatio Sands, but that's this part right here. I was like, holy crud! I thought we were going to see the Quarren get split in half. That it got dark pretty quick. So like I said, it felt very Star Wars right off the bat.
And I think maybe that's why they went with Horatio Sands as the myth role. Just the idea of, okay, we're gonna get dark fast. We need some way to kind of bring the tone down a notch because otherwise, the parents are gonna start taking the kids out of the room. I mean, and of course, the swerve, the fact that everybody's thinking he's there for the guys he just took out. Nope, he's there for the guy who sounds funny and it's not really much of a threat to anybody.
It's actually the first time we actually got to see how bounty hunters actually work, because the only time we ever saw, except for in the Clone Wars, um, but I mean, the only time we see bounty hunters is in Empire Strikes Back, and we just hear about them. All right, so here we are. We're walking now to the Uber stand. This is kind of this is kind of what I'm talking about with using the volume. This was,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It works in this environment though, because like again, this is a very barren, sparse planet, and so it makes sense for them to use it in that way in a setting like this.
And here's the thing: we don't expect them to go out to say the middle of a glacier in Iceland or Greenland and build a whole set
Yeah, but
just film.
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying, just from, I think if we're talking about, comparing then to now,
Now, mm-hmm.
I think they've gotten a lot better at using the volume and blending it, because you look, yes, you look, it's a very barren wasteland, but you can obviously see where the volume starts and where the stage ends here.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, so, and yeah, and I'm cutting them some slack because it was the first time they were using it, so I'll
Yeah.
give them that.
Well, it's the first time we're seeing any of this, and I think that's one of the things that we were very lenient at the time of is just simply they're doing movie level effects for TV. So there is some element where you have to go, okay, everything gets crunched down, everything gets pixelated, everything gets the quality gets diminished. But in terms of this, being used for the storytelling, it's working. And I think that's really where you kind of go, well, if you're gonna cut him some slack, it's where it's working for in terms of the story. So you go, okay, he's in this barren ice planet, and they just got driven out to wherever he parked his ship, and
The big
and this guy,
comedian from Big Bang Theory. That was another one. Like I've said a couple weeks ago, having having actors that are highly recognizable is sometimes a little jarring in Star
Star
Wars.
Wars.
Um, and because like I said, I was like, oh, it's the guy from Big Bang Theory. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's Horatio Sands from SNL. And again, but um,
I don't know how I feel about all of that, to be perfectly honest. And I think I treat it like a case by case basis. Like every now and then, I'm really entertained by it, like, oh, it's so and so. But then there are other times where, like you said, it can take you out of it, and now you're just thinking about, oh, it's a famous actor,
Kind
um,
of like the episode with Jack Black and Lizzo in season three, where everybody had a hard time distancing the fact from, hey, that's Jack Black, that's Lizzo.
they leaned way into that though too, like
Mhm,
that
mhm.
like way into it, so that there was no way that you could be distracted by them, because they were the whole point in a lot of way. um,
Right.
I would also say that I haven't rewatched this in a minute, and I was just rewatching Skeleton Crew yesterday, and I expected the effects here to like pale in comparison, because Skeleton gorgeous, and this still looks pretty darn good to me.
Yeah. I think again, it's the recognition that they're doing. I mean, again, the ship is an actual prop set that they built, or at least the cockpit and certain pieces of it. The effects that they use in the volume, meshing it with the creature effects for the creature that just attacked the racer crafts, which so nice to see. I mean, I almost forgotten how much I like this ship. I know that we got the modded Naboo starfighter now for Mando and Grogu, but there's something to this ship that speaks to the fact that he's a bounty hunter. This is his home. This is how he travels the
I
galaxy.
don't
This is how he
know.
ferries ferries.
You say it's his home. It reminds me of the ship from Spaceballs. It reminds me of
Mhm.
it.
The
It looks like the
Winnebago.
Winnebago.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Again, because it's the idea of that's where he contains everything he's got. That's how he ferries his targets to and from the job, and we're about to see how he gets them back alive.
See, here's my
You know,
Horatio Sands thing. Okay, so they just have him talking so much
hmm
from the beginning of this episode through now, and we're going to hear him talking about the toilet here in a minute. I think that
pressure.
I think that's where it is. It's like
I think
it,
that's the gag though. Like that's meant, they do that deliberately to make us hyper aware that Din doesn't talk,
I
and
suppose
it's
that's
just a
true.
guy in a mask.
That's a good point. And by the way, that's the
Yeah.
first time we ever see a toilet in Star Wars.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the whole fresher toilet thing, but whatever. They got to use
But then,
something.
but you actually get to one of the big points that the show really had to not necessarily fight, but had to contend with, which is the fact that their protagonist, their lead character, is someone we don't see. We don't see his face. We don't see his reactions. He cannot act with his face because it's a mask. And then it's somebody who, leaning into those Western traditions, does not speak a lot. He's the strong silent type. So while it might be awesome to have a show where it's only, no dialogue, it's just action, it can be quite difficult for audiences, particularly at the offset, to go, this is the guy you're going to follow, and he's not going to say more than three lines, and you're not going to get to read any body language from him. Yep. And there goes the mithril in the
In the Tanner. Yeah.
freeze, in the Tanner. That's right. But uh, but again, it's a difficult challenge that they set themselves up by giving the character who will eventually come to know as Din Djarin all these restrictions. Because I mean, you're the lead actor, you're the lead character, but you don't really speak a lot, and that means that all the other characters got to carry the conversation for you.
But
You
and my
talk about.
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
go ahead.
my contradiction here is that as we're going to come up and meet Grief Karga is that I have no problem with Carl Weathers, even though I called him Chubbs, through the whole thing. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems to fit. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what the deal is. But anyway, Fredo. Or I'm sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
Dave.
Well, we were talking about the evolution of the character of Mando, and like one of the things that I'm struck by watching this early episode is the lack of armor, the Beskar
Right.
armor that he's missing. It's still at this point, and how vulnerable that makes him seem, but also, you know, maybe poorer, less well put together. Just he's sort of scraping by.
He's somebody who's very much of the time of his galaxy. I mean, as we start, and he's not wealthy. He's not engaged in a lot of stuff. He's having to deal with, picking up whatever jobs available. Like right now, Grief Carter said, "Look, these are all the jobs I got."
And
You know,
I'm sorry. And by the way, J.J. Abrams caught a lot of crap for his you got to have a cantina scene, and so he like total his whole Maz Kanata thing. Everybody's like that's just a ripoff. What they're doing here is actually a way that you do the cantina scene well, because you're in a bar, you have a lot of aliens just milling about. You're not like making a huge production of it.
mhm.
So I thought they did well with that. Sorry to interrupt you there, but
No, no, no. But again, it's a good point because you're in a cantina, but you're not noticing that it's a cantina, and you just know that it's a place where people are gathering. And again, they're kind of it's acting this scene is actually acting as a good way of describing the state of the galaxy as things are at this point.
so
There's
well.
fewer bounties. They used to have much better business dynamics with the Empire because the Empire always had enemies. If you're an enemy, no Empire, the Republic's not putting bounties out on people. They have a whole, you know, uh, organization to take care of that for them. So this is when it creates a dynamic for guys like Mando, where it's like, well, I need to get more work because look at the state of my armor.
To your point about the armor and state of the armor, also think about and after what I'm struck by looking at the very first couple minutes of this episode is how dark it is. And I mean, Navarro gets to be a nicer place by season 3, but just the lighting that they use,
Mm-hmm.
as it goes from squalor to you know even here we're in daylight, it's still kind of gray.
It's very dingy. It's very, I mean, again, it's leaning into those lived in universe expectations of Star Wars, but it's also indicating, again, the state of the galaxy at this point after the rebellion won, the Empire got deposed. Some people benefited, some people didn't. And
So
some people, life went along the same way.
here's Jabba's door knocker thing.
Mm-hmm.
Too many Easter eggs in this, especially in this first episode, or just in maybe the first season. I mean,
I never thought that at the time. I remember.
because I don't know if we've already seen it, but we're gonna see the monkey lizards, and things like that,
Mhm.
um, and there's your obligatory gonk droid, and I don't know, just I don't
Mm,
I like it. I like Easter eggs. I didn't feel like beating over the head with it, but a lot of people had criticisms of the episode for that.
I think the door
Honestly,
knocker might have been maybe almost a step too far, just because, like, why would every door
Well,
have that droid?
but to argue here about every door that you go up to now has either a ring or a Nest
Eh.
doorbell. So, which if I could have the little thing that comes out and goes, I'd love to have that. It come ring my doorbell.
So again, state of the galaxy. Look at how beat up these stormtroopers
Yeah,
are, and they've seen some things.
they're jumpy. They're
Yeah.
very jumpy, which is not the norm for the stormtroopers as we've known them. I mean, they're quick on the draw, but these guys look on edge, which gets triggered over here by the doctor coming into the room, and they're all talking to one another, threatening Mando to stand down. And he's like, I can beat you. But I think to your point there and about too much, I didn't think so. Mostly because they found ways to put them in, like the door knocker. Okay, he's going to a door, go knock on the door and meet a client that doesn't want to be seen in public. Having a
and
security system makes sense.
isn't it
The fact that
funny
they got
that
a gump droid, okay, we know what they're for.
isn't it
You
funny
know,
that the only other time we have ever seen that is at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, and they put it in the Mandalorian, and everybody loses their damn mind, thinking
right.
that's just a bridge too far. Not to, and I'm not saying that's how you were,
Mhm.
Dave, but there were a lot of people that were just like ready to jump off a bridge because that was in there, and it's like,
For everything, right?
yeah,
Like you said, the gong droid probably set some people off. And you have to walk this line between paying homage and making it seem familiar, but also just not overdoing it.
By the way, I really want to know how the technology of the trackers work. But then I'm like, maybe I don't want to know because I really don't want the government to figure out how to make that stuff work.
So here's an unsolved mystery. We still don't know hardly anything about Werner Herzog at this point.
Mm,
Even his name, we just know him as the client.
Yeah.
right. And that gets interesting because again, Werner Herzog, like, so there's some importance to his character. He's surrounded by Imperial officers and stormtroopers and doctors and whatnot, and he's trying to get Mando to accept his job, but he's really talking in riddles, and that's something that kind of sets you, okay, what exactly are you trying to get him to do? He's got this target, he wants brought back,
Well, it's the
but if
mob.
not, well, right, but it kind of puts you on edge immediately about the realities of the job that is being tasked with, you know,
You know,
and mhm.
no, go ahead, finish your thought.
No, I was just going to say, and even this line about putting things in order after a long disarray, it kind of tells you, you know, very much like the rest of the Imperials, all they care about is getting back into power. So, is that something that Mando wants to do, or is it something that
There's
he's
the
even
monkey lizard.
considering?
This was
Uh,
this,
but it's the other one
yeah,
staring
his
up. That's
friend
like
going, ah.
that's the one that got everybody.
The monkey.
It's
That was pretty harsh. That was pretty
yeah.
harsh. Um,
Everybody was fine with the one roasting. Everybody was kind of at the one staring at his buddy.
I gotta say that line hits a little bit harder with the
Mm-hmm.
fascism underlying with the natural order of things, and
Mm-hmm.
that hits a little bit
Mm-hmm.
harder today than it did when it first aired.
by the way, I know it's
Yes, it
not
does.
it's not in this episode, but it is in the next episode when we were at the Pelicans game on Monday. Brittany was going, "I want to see the baby." King
The
cake
baby
baby.
was there though.
Yeah,
We
he
got the
was.
baby.
But did you take pictures with the baby?
Didn't take pictures with the baby, no.
See,
Um,
next time Urban South has the baby out there, we need to get out there, take pictures with the baby.
So the armor here has a Mythazar crest above her place of business here.
yeah, and again, this was a good thing. My in-laws watched this series, and the most that they watched Star Wars was they took their kids to see the Star Wars movie. They're not like Star Wars geeks like us, um, and this show was very accessible to them because you don't. I mean, you see that it's a mythosaur. If you don't know what it is, it's not. You're not hosed. You know.
It's the age old commandment that Kevin Feige put into the MCU movies, where if you're going to make a callback or a reference to something, it should either add or be neutral, but it should never subtract. It should never take an audience member out of the experience of, well, I don't know what that is. It should be either be something that a fan recognizes and geeks out over, or it should be something that somebody has no idea, doesn't pay attention to. They'll come back to it later. And that's a good thing that they did here because it makes you recognize that not everybody needs to know what a mythosaur is yet, but it's going to be something.
So here's the other thing: is that we talked about the volume earlier, and so far we've only seen it probably used once. People were like, "Oh, they used volume too much," and it's blah blah blah. And it's like these are all just typical sets right now.
And part of really what's really well done is that because of the nature of the characters that Mando is interacting with, like we went from a saloon where he had a shootout, a fight, to the ship, to Grief Karga's cantina, to meeting the client, to now the covert. It's all been indoors. It's all been hidden away. It's all been hidden corners of the world that he inhabits. So you can get away with some of that stuff where you don't need to build massive sets, be outdoors, that kind of thing. By the way, we get that flashback right there to the the Night of a Thousand Tears, I believe that is.
No, I don't think that was Night of a Thousand Tears. It just
Or is that
was
just
whenever
that's
the
just when
whenever
they
the droids invaded
okay.
his.
I'll say too that Din's flashback there reminds Grogu's later on with when he's
Yeah.
like that sort of trauma that's just sort of ingrained in you and having to. And again, they share that, and their foe was the same ultimately. This is why Din has this huge hang up with droids for so long. Um, and Grogu was an enemy of the Separatists, and um, you kind of like see that those parallels there that are kind of nifty.
I'm sorry, I can't unsee it. It looks like the Winnebago. Um,
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. Like, right, he's not that well off. He's living in a
yeah.
Winnebago.
It's also again it describes who his character is. It describes the world he inhabits. He's not the character that we come to see by the end of season three, where he's rubbing elbows with some of the most important characters in the galaxy. He's well, just another bounty hunter in a galaxy where he just has to figure out how to get by.
Okay, so I made a joke earlier about okay, did you think we were on Hoth because it's a snow planet, and how many people thought we're probably on Tatooine because this is like a desert type scape. That's the thing that drives me crazy about Star Wars fans. So if you're listening to this, listen to me good. You're filming somewhere on planet Earth. There are only so many biomes that you can have. So if no, not every desert planet has to be Tatooine, and even though it tends to be in Star Wars, not every forest planet has to be Endor. So quit just assuming when you see a trailer. Um, oh, we got blurgs. And again, that's an Easter egg for the geeks who know, and otherwise it's just another creature attacking him.
I did a Life Day reference earlier, similar.
And here we come with Queel.
Yep.
I like Queel's character.
Yep.
I mean, this
Which
is just love how he is portrayed. Nick Nolte's voice is awesome. This Ugnaught being
which this was
kind of a
this
guide
was
to Din. It's I like the character.
this was the first time we saw Knock Knock after Empire Strikes Back, right?
Other than
Rebels.
what's his face in Rebels.
Okay, you're right.
Mensch.
You're right.
Wasn't his name
Yeah.
Mensch?
You're right. I forgot about him. I could have.
But he was
Instead
your
of,
traditional Ugnaught, right? Like squealing like a pig,
Yeah.
and this guy is like here just carrying on a conversation, and it's interesting that they acknowledge that too. That he talks about like people not necessarily looking at him as being an equal, because his kind is traditionally been enslaved or used for manual labor,
By the
and
way,
that's interesting. This is all very interesting.
and how they put the character together, they keep doing this because, for example, I mean, obviously this is not Nick Nolte, in it's a little person in a mask, and Neil in Skeleton Crew was handled the same way. The kid was used as reference, and he was the voice, obviously, but then they used a little person in a mask, and it might be the same that did Queel actually, but I just find it interesting that they do that. Now here we do get name dropped Mythosaur, Dave. This is the first time we hear Mythosaur in anything, because Queel yells at him and says, "Your people tame the Mythosaur."
Right. Well, this is sort of the promise of the show. The promise of the show was we're going to give you this sort of space western, but we're also going to dive into Mandalorian lore. And that was it. That was that when we saw the trailers and the behind the scenes and all the stuff early on. That was what we were basically promised. And
Yeah, you know,
They've been doing those two things.
and people got upset, you know, in season 2 and season 3 when more Mandalorians started, you know, kind of um, taking over. Like he got more Bo-Katan's story than he did Din Djarin, and I guess yes, I mean this episode when it's called, you know, the show's called The Mandalorian. I at first thought, okay, this is just going to be about this Mandalorian right here. But now I am totally comfortable with the title of the show, The Mandalorian, being like, you know, I don't know, the Irishman, if you will, or
Right.
the Scotsman, or you know, it's like it's more of a broad, you know, it's not about an individual, but a, you know, but a group of people, and so I kind of like that idea, and I think that allows the show to breathe and allows it to, you know, if we're done with Din Djarin, we can go follow other Mandalorians or Mandalorian stories.
And I think in some ways, I mean, this episode is taking us on a journey with the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, where we see him overcome some challenges, exposed to different aspects of his world, and even put him in this environment where he had to train how to ride uh, the whatchamacallit, the blurred. And so there's a natural inclination to think, well, this is what the show's going to be all about. And I think they recognized probably by two-thirds of season two that it couldn't just be that, or that if it was just going to be that, they're going to resolve all their issues mighty quickly. So I think it's good that they started involving Bo-Katan, some of the other Mandalorian aspect, because again, it expands the story, it expands the universe as we know it, and it allows you to kind of end up in a dynamic where you can have Ahsoka, you can have the Mando and Grogu movie, you can have Skeleton Crew, you can have all these other stories can happen concurrently, but no, there's always okay. You can always come back to this.
Dave, you mentioned something a little bit about it earlier, but how do you guys feel looking at this now? The special effects, the visual effects, the costumes. Um, First of all, what was your reaction then and now to the quality of those things? And do you think it's on par with the movies, or do you think it's subpar?
I think I was a true believer early on. Um, and again, like knowing the backstory, knowing like, well, we have this new technology, and if this had been around, 15 years ago, George would have, gotten every TV show that he'd ever thought of made. Um, and we never saw any of that material. So from that point of view, I embraced it wholeheartedly from the get go. Um, I do think there's a slight downgrade, but I don't know how to quantify this. There's so many bad effects in movies nowadays too, even like big budget movies, that for me at least, just the level of attention to detail that they put into this made me a fan of it. And like I said, it's better than bad efforts when people just don't get the physics quite right, or they rely on the um, digital effects a little too much. Um, it all begins to feel very fake and not at all tangible or real. And this does a good job of feeling tangible.
And I'll say, I mean, because right now we're getting to the start of the big action set piece of this episode, which is the shootout at the compound. And maybe I could have had an issue or two with some of the makeup effects, some of the costume effects, but I love the fact that it feels like every single character there is there. Like Din just shot somebody off a roof, and I'm pretty sure that was an actual stunt person who got shot and fell off the roof. And there is something to having that live action special effect. Maybe where there's two or three elements that are digitally introduced, so that then the rest of the stuff is actual people on a stage performing stunts, performing the actions, so that it becomes more believable. You're willing to forgive maybe a mistake or a lapse in an effect here or there because everything else is just carrying you along for the ride.
By the way, I did not know that we were going to get an IG droid, and I think this is like the coolest thing
Mm-hmm.
ever.
Yeah.
And I love how we're going to get up to the point now where he's going to start, thinking he has to go into self-destruct mode. That was funny. Um, but I think one of the things I can see in this first episode, everything seems very confined. The shots seem, I mean, you can tell you're filming on a back lot, and a very kind of small back lot at that. It's like same thing. I guess a criticism I heard in like the second episode of Skeleton Crew when the kids were being chased by the pirates in Port Borgo, you could tell that it was on a very small stage because everybody was kind of half-assed running. You know what I mean? So, like I said, this I can see that it feels very confined, and as the series went on, it got bigger. I think they learned how to make the environments feel a little bit more expansive.
You know what's interesting is because at the time and I didn't worry about that because uh, this felt like everything from
By the
the
way,
end of the
I
Wild
didn't
Punch.
worry about it at the time either. I want to say that real quick. That I think this all
Mm-hmm.
works. I'm just saying that I can see
Mm-hmm.
that it looks confined. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, because that's what it threw me back off again. I was thinking to everything from the Wild Bunch to the Way of the Gun, which are two different. One's a classic, one's a more modern version of a western. So this is what this felt like. Like, okay, we're having that western shootout in a confined uh, courtyard. So and that's what this feels like. Uh, and that felt fine, and it still does feel fine. It still works. But you're right. I think in some ways, some of the latter shows have expanded the action set pieces for both this show and other Star Wars shows, so that this can almost feel rather quaint at some point. Like, oh, look, this is the start, and it's so small. But at the same time, again, I go back to that point of this is the start, and the start is small. And the show has done a good job over 3 seasons of expanding so that the climax of season 3 is a massive battle on Mandalore between Mandalorians and Imperials, and you don't question that being massive and this being small. It's just the story has gone much bigger.
The only way that this personally feels small to me is that I've now seen a very similar setup in multiple shows now. For this with the shootout out in
Right.
the like we saw the same thing in Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, his sort of show with Vader came in a very similar arid environment as this. It just like in that way the universe feels smaller because we're sort of seeing some of the same tropes over and
And
over.
and that might have been a choice because you want the viewer to feel that anxiety of being cornered.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be a choice. I don't know. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I remember I did this when I was listening to podcasts, and they said that new Yoda's species was somehow going to come into play, but I didn't know how, and I had totally forgotten about it. And then we get to this point. I will tell you that the moment that I saw these ears, I got giddy. I mean, I remember Britt and our jaws dropped, and we were just like, right now, right here, it was just like, oh. I mean, that was just, I did not see this coming. What was your guys' reaction when you saw Baby Yoda, and now seeing Baby Yoda for the, for the millionth time for the first time? How do you have the same reaction?
Well, I think it's, I mean, in some ways it's different because we've spent so many years now with the character, with we know his name. Back then, we had no name, so we could only go by Baby Yoda, which is funny that in so many ways, and I think we remarked on this at the time that clearly Disney and Lucasfilm had no idea about such the impact the character was going to have because they didn't have any merch for him. Now you can go find every kind of Grogu merch all over the
It
universe.
was the best secret ever kept. But
Nobody knew about it. Like remember, it was I think maybe it was Dave who had one of those Mardi Gras T-shirts with Baby Yoda then,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and that was like one of the first pieces of his merch that we saw anywhere, and that wasn't even official because
Yeah,
either
you couldn't get merch for like a year because they didn't want the secret to get out.
right, and it was so the fact that we got to that point and we hadn't heard anything about it. I mean, those faces like, okay, wow, again, it's a way to up the stakes because
but again, what was your so again? What was your
uh,
when what was your reaction when you saw Baby Yoda for the first time? And is it the same as seeing it now? Does this
probably not the same for me, but I do find that it's still works.
It moves the narrative forward. Like again, like you think you've got this all figured out. It's the space western, and it's going to be about the Mandalorians, and now they introduce this oddball element that has nothing to do with either of those things. And so now you're dealing with a show that you weren't necessarily expecting.
So after watching the first episode now, where have Disney Plus series gotten better?
Hmm. I think just off the top of my head, if and comparing it this the first Disney Plus show to the most recent one, something like Skeleton Crew, I think they've and this is what makes it so difficult because it's so many different creators. We like to think that Star Wars is this monolith, and it isn't. This is Dave Filoni and John Favreau, which is different from John Watts and his team that did Skeleton Crew, which is different from Deborah Chow who did Obi Wan Kenobi, and so forth. And even Dave Filoni doing Ahsoka, it's a different vibe. So I think that they found ways to tell a story that expands without necessarily, I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a nice way of saying that they figured out some stuff out, but then we still get stuff like the Acolyte, which was well done and properly filmed and whatever, but you could see where the flow of the story didn't quite match, and we still complain to this day about how much story they got to get to before the finale and not feeling rushed.
Well, very very quickly and I'll just say very short. I think where they've gotten better is they've gotten better, even though it wasn't bad in this first episode, but they've gotten better with their space action filming.
Mm-hmm.
Those effects. Um, I think.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, you barely get anything here, but
you
I
think
do
about
recall.
what they did in Ahsoka. I mean, that was this was one motion control shot of the Razor Crest, and then I remember in a later episode, a couple episodes later, when they're going to Tatooine and the other bounty hunter is he has a little bit of a shootout with him. That was just it looked like Asteroids 1983. Um, so they've gotten better with that. I think just figuring out how to work within their budget and get the quality shots. I don't know, Dave.
You
What do you think?
One of the things that strikes me going back and watching this is again just the nature of the show. How this is just your kung fu. Every week you get into a new adventure, and then you go into the next adventure the following week, and then you sort of interlace that with development of the main storyline and development for your main characters. And um, I think like what I like about that is that it gives them a lot more freedom to not feel stuck into, well, we've got to do this in 8 episodes, which is feels very confining for some of these Disney Plus shows where we talk about this a lot, where it's like you get to the seventh episode and you're like, well, how are they going to fit everything into the eighth episode? And then the eighth episode feels, rushed or whatever. Um, this show doesn't really have that issue because you can take your time. You can make a season that's 16 episodes long, or you can make it 7 episodes long, just whatever the story dictates. Um, and so, like, I don't know if they've learned that lesson.
That seems like
you
something
know,
they've gone backwards from. You're correct.
yeah,
I would agree with that because
uh,
it's very much like Rebels. You had the overall. We have to get from point A to point B, and there's all these little sub points in here that will give little crumbs that will get there. But each episode was its own beginning, middle, end, and then the next one didn't pick up from where we left off. It was another day in the life of Ezra, or whatever.
mhm.
Mandalorian was the same way, and so I agree with you on that one. Now we're putting things in too much of a box. Um,
To that
but I
point,
think
there,
it's because Mandalorian was never conceived as a movie. The Acolyte was conceived first as a movie, and then let's make it into a Disney Plus show. Skeleton Crew was conceived as a movie, and then let's make it into a Disney Plus show. So that might be part of the problem there.
but to that point also, and this is something that you kind of pointed out just now. Think of all the creators of those shows. John Watts is a movie director. Uh, I think Leslie Hedlund was a TV showrunner before, so maybe she breaks it. But most of the other stuff has been done by people who do movies transitioning into TV. The Mandalorian was created by Dave Filoni, who comes from the world of TV. He's already had Clone Wars and Rebels, where you had to map out seasons, so you have to kind
Mhm.
of think on TV terms, and that's a different way of thinking. Whereas, in a movie you think beginning, middle, end, and you usually think about an economy of words and moments because you only have so many in a 2-hour film. Whereas in a TV show, you can feel like, oh, I have all this time to tell, and it's like you do, but you don't, sort of. So balancing that equation can be not as easy to imagine as people think, and particularly for people like Robert Rodriguez or John Watts, it can be somewhat of a difficult transition because you have to think, this I am making one episode and it's got to tell a cohesive story, but then connects to 7 other cohesive stories to make one big story.
And it can be done effectively either way, to be fair,
Mhm.
right? Like, I think Skeleton Crew is a perfect example. Like, those shows are sort of like 30 minutes on the dot. Uh, and it was a very limited story told in a very limited way. And yet it really worked for that story because they had a clear vision of what they wanted to achieve. And the timing of it really sort of, they had it down pat. I mean, I don't know how many episodes. Was it 8? I think it was 8
8.
episodes, right?
Yeah.
And it was exactly right. That was the exact right length that it needed to be. Um, Mandalorian, again, it's more like Clone Wars or Rebels or Bad Batch. Um, you can take your time. You can meander a little bit, and it's okay to meander. Um, and so, like, from that basis, like, if we ever get another season of Mandalorian, I would hope that they would continue to sort of lean into that. Like, don't be in a hurry. Give us those little smaller adventures too.
So, and I guess my last question, and these are just again just kind of questions coming out of my caboose, but looking back at this, did anything after we just got done watching this episode? Did anything like click in your brain as you were going? Oh, I remember that being a lot cooler than it was, or that's not that's not as spiffy as I thought it was. Anything, or is it still like just hold up, and it's fine if
Holds
it
up.
still holds up. You
I
know
think it
the
holds up.
the thing that there's stop motion in it. There's puppets. There's all sorts of things. But that's Star Wars. I mean, let's remember that the asteroid monster was a sock puppet for crying out loud. The Rancor was a stop motion puppet. Um, so I don't know what people want sometimes, and sometimes it's those little imperfections, if you will, that makes it feel like Star Wars and not like something else. So
Well, and think just right quick, just in this episode, that little moment with Wheel and the Blur. So if that had been a movie, maybe that's in there, maybe it isn't. I don't think anybody was asking for that, but it becomes such a great little moment on the way of becoming a bigger thing down the line. And I think sometimes that's where we as fans fall for thinking that we know better. Because sometimes we think, oh, well, I want to see space battles. I want to see duels. I want to see all that stuff. That's great. And you do want to see that. I know I do. But you also want to see all these things that connect it, that give it meaning, that make it matter. So that down the line, when Wheel is coming to help save uh, Mandalorian or he's sacrificing himself, means something to you. If you have to set up the groundwork or put, in order for all those big action moments to then matter. Because otherwise, they're just brainless mash them up video.
So
Aaron, I do have something that, like, when I think about, you say, oh, is there anything about this that sort of disappoints you now, or it's not as great as it was when we watched it the first time? I was going to say the fans, because I just remember watching this and just everybody who, not everybody, but most people who watched this were on board with it right away,
yeah,
and we're just like excited, and it was like it was a new thing for Star Wars fans, and we were all so excited, and it was great. And now it just seems like there's so much divisiveness and stupid bickering and just so much negativity.
I'm sorry. Is this
Um,
your first day as a Star Wars fan, Dave?
yeah, yeah, but like I, I mean, we're
No,
all
you're
old
right.
enough to remember the Return of the Jedi Ewok criticisms, and like now, and of course the prequels, and it's always been around, but um, Mando was something that a lot of people
Well,
really enjoyed.
okay, so that's interesting. I think that would be an interesting research project or case study at some point because, well, I mean, again, the guy who's cutting my hair today, he's a Star Wars fan, and I asked him, I said, "Did you finish Skeleton Crew?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, we finished it," and he wasn't anti-Skeleton Crew. He was just like, yeah, it was all right. It was, he said he and his girlfriend, they had to stop every now and again and go, "Oh yeah, okay, kids show," and that, and so he didn't go into the cynic land, but he wasn't over the moon about it like we were. Um, and so that makes me wonder. It's like I would love to have a focus group of Star Wars fans and just say, what? Okay, what is it that you want?
What do you want?
What is it that what gets your underwear in a bunch? When you watch a new Star Wars thing, and have it multi generational because I think that is you know, like I said, the people who, grew up with the Clone Wars are really, oh, that's a bit of news we didn't talk about. But the people who grew up with the Clone Wars are getting tired of the old, original trilogy, and probably it's going to come to a point where the kids who grew up with the sequels are going to get tired of hearing about the prequels. So, which, by the way, I want to pause for a second. Did you guys hear that rumor is Dave Filoni's trying to get Natalie Portman for Ahsoka season 2?
So that, and I saw some people were happy about it, some people were not happy about it,
Hey,
and I'm just like,
if we're gonna do another flashback and it's got to involve Padme, get Natalie Portman, please. Yeah, I'm all for it. But anyway, but I don't know.
I
Like I
think
said, I think the Star Wars fans. You're right, Dave. It's like again, I keep coming back to it's like my criticism of being in the 501st is that some of these people need to remember that we're all in our 40s and 50s dressed up as stormtroopers, and it's like lighten up, Francis. It's like just enjoy the show. If you don't enjoy the show, then go watch a different show. But why do you feel the need to why do you feel the need to go and flame it on social media? But then B, it's like, okay, so if you had your druthers, what would you want? So, and I think people started kind of going into cynic land when in the second season, particularly when we start getting more of the leaning into the Clone Wars again. Here we go. It's like we got Bo-Katan. Okay, here we go. We've got all these, it wasn't fresh. It wasn't, we're starting to tell old stories rather than a new story. So.
Well, and I think there's two thoughts I have, and then I'll let Dave go in. Thought number one is it's perfectly fine to not be wowed by every Star Wars show. It's going to happen. Again, we've said this plenty of times. The beauty of this universe is that it's big enough that you can take what you want, appreciate what you want, and leave the rest behind. If if Book of Boba Fett wasn't your jam, maybe The Acolyte is. If Ahsoka season two maybe felt a bit too much leaning into Clone Wars and Rebels, and that wasn't what you were really into, maybe Skeleton Crew was. Again, the beauty of it is when you have enough for everybody so they can find their Star Wars. So that's thought number one that I have. Thought number two is just simply, and looking at it from the standpoint of this episode being the starting point of this expanded, what we call the Mandoverse, all these characters and all these shows, is that it wasn't always going to stay this way. This is the starting point. This is chapter one, verse one. If it had stayed like this for the next three seasons, everybody would have gotten bored.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Maybe not everybody, but a good number of people, just because you can't just do the I don't know, same Law and Order episode every week for
Right.
30 years, and have people come back. Particularly in a science fiction fantasy setting, you have to expand your story, create new dynamics, and I think by and large they've done a good job of doing that because you have to. Otherwise, again, there's too much competition out there for you to be doing the same thing.
So my final thing here, I will say, is I'm looking through here on Disney Plus at the originals and not counting the animation, because the animation is always kind of rewatchable for me. That's something that I can grab an episode of Rebels or an episode of the Clone Wars or an episode of the Bad Batch. But just looking at their live action stuff, and I'm talking about, I've said what I kind of grade things on is rewatchability. Skeleton Crew, highly rewatchable for me. I've watched every episode a bunch of times. Andor, rewatchable, but you've got to watch the whole dang thing. It's like you can't just pull an episode and feel satisfied. You have to watch that whole thing, but it's really rewatchable. Mandalorian, very rewatchable, and one episode at a time from different seasons. I was doing that a couple weeks ago where it's like I was watching, I remember that episode from I think it was season 1, and then I watched it. I was like, I remember this episode from season 3, and I watched that, and you could bounce around and enjoy it. Acolyte, I haven't rewatched anything since it's been done. And maybe I should, maybe that's something we should do at some point, is just, okay, let's do a revisit of that after some time has passed. Ahsoka, I've done a lot of rewatching. Again, not necessarily in chronological order, but just kind of maybe a little bit of bouncing. Book of Boba Fett, I haven't done a lot of rewatching except for the Luke Skywalker episode.
Episode 4, where it's not about Boba Fett?
So that's kind of, which is kind of funny to me. Obi-Wan Kenobi, I don't think I've watched that a whole lot of times since even though I loved it. But I haven't done a really rewatch. Maybe once I did a rewatch of it.
I'd put that one in the category of Andor, maybe, where you would want to watch the whole thing.
Yeah, probably.
Or close to the whole thing.
But, so anyway, I don't know. That's,
I guess the one last thought I had on this would be that I come back to your comments about snow at the beginning of the episode and just like seeing it through the eyes of someone who hadn't really experienced it before, and I think like I look at Star Wars, or I try to look at Star Wars that way. I try to enjoy bits and pieces, even if I'm not like. Even if it's not my favorite, or I think it doesn't necessarily do justice to what we've seen previously, I still try to enjoy it. I always come back to that line, somehow Palpatine has returned. And like,
somehow Palpatine returned.
It's objectively a terrible line, but I adore it because I've gotten so much entertainment out of it from all the memes and everything since. And it's just, Like, to me, that's sort of my biggest takeaway from this discussion is just like, yeah, it's Star Wars. We're trying to have some fun here, right? And I remember when Mando first came out, we were having fun. That's what we were doing. Space westerns, yeah, sign me up.
You know,
Let's do more of that.
Actually, the next episode we need to do this with is you all need to make me watch the Frog Lady episode, because that was the first one where I think I was like, "What in the heck is this?" Maybe we need to watch. Maybe we need to rewatch that. See what I think now. But
I like Frog Lady.
Fredo, any parting thoughts before we tell everybody good night?
Parting thoughts in terms of overall, I'll echo what Dave said about this being Star Wars. And hey, isn't it great that we live in a time where we're getting more Star Wars than we've ever had ever. And this is kind of the big start of that. And I think a lot of times we get trapped into what we want these shows to be or what we imagine. Because look, when everybody goes back to when they first announced the Mandalorian coming to Disney Plus, everybody thought it was Boba Fett. So the big surprise that it wasn't Boba Fett was like a shock to some people. I think some people never got over that initial shock. So just simply, sometimes we have to kind of take a step back our own selves as fans and go, okay, tell me your story. Because that's what the movies did at the start, whether it was the original trilogy or the prequels. We accepted that we're going to go see a story, we're going to digest it, and we're either going to like it or not like it. And both are fine, but at least go into it recognizing you're going to get something you haven't seen or heard before, and hopefully be something that connects with you. And they've had more hits than misses with me, and even the stuff that I didn't know where I wasn't necessarily the most thrilled, I found something I could like out of it. So look, we started, talking about what's going to happen in the future with Star Wars because we're very quickly running out of new Star Wars, you know, that we're going to be able to look forward to for a while. So I'm glad that this stuff exists, if nothing else.
But it's kind of funny because I agree with you. I've said it many times. Like we get new Star Wars, and it's like it's awesome. But I think it could also be said is that could also be part of the problem, because it's kind of like I remember in college went to Chicago for a drumline competition, and it's like all we ate all weekend long was pizza. And when we got back, it's like the last thing that we wanted for a couple weeks was pizza. Even though I've said it before, all pizza is good pizza, but after you've had, well, imagine you come to visit New Orleans and you eat all New Orleans food, you go back to the Midwest and really you just, I just want some bland food right now because I've been inundated with other stuff. So I think it's actually going to be kind of good that, we're going to have Andor, and then we're going to have a little bit of a breather, let people get kind of a reset and remember that we had to wait 13 years or some crap like that for episode 1 to come out, so, like I said, having a little bit of a breather isn't going to be too bad. But anyway, with that, I think I hope you enjoyed our trip down memory lane. Anything for the good of the order? Go to Chewbacca in a week.
The Saints keep auditioning or interviewing head coaches. Supposedly in person, goes back, starts happening again tomorrow. We'll see what they do.
Breaking news: Dave is going to be the Saints head coach. So.
At the rate we're going, Dave, are you willing to accept millions of dollars for the potential to go 4-13 next year?
I'm willing to make the sacrifice.
You know what? So am I, because they're going to fire me and pay me like $7 million. I wish somebody would fire me for $7 million. They can fire me for $1 million. I'm cheap. But with that, we will say, who dat? Who dat? Have a great week, everybody. McConkey.